Have you ever faced a situation that seemed absolutely hopeless? A final diagnosis, a door bolted shut with impossibility, a crisis where all the world's power seemed aligned against you, and the only thing you had left was faith. A faith that, let's be honest, sometimes feels small and fragile in the face of giants of iron and stone. In chapter 12 of the book of Acts, the early church was living through its darkest night. King Herod, a tyrant thirsty for popularity, had begun a brutal persecution. He had already killed James, one of the pillars of the church, with the sword. And seeing that this pleased the crowd, he went further. He arrested the leader, the Apostle Peter, the Rock. And it was no ordinary prison. Peter was placed in a maximum security fortress, handed over to 4 squads of 4 soldiers each. 16 guards for one man. The plan was simple and cruel. After the Passover festival, he would be publicly executed. The head of the movement would be cut off. From a human perspective, the story was over. What could a small group of believers, hiding in a house, do against the power of Rome and the fury of a king? This message is for you who are facing your Herod, for you whose hope is chained in the prison of an impossible circumstance, for you who wonder if your prayer really makes any difference. The story of Peter's deliverance is not just a historical record of a miracle. It is God's blueprint for our liberation. It is living proof that there are no chains that prayer cannot break, no guards that prayer cannot put to sleep, and no iron gates that prayer cannot open. By the end of this journey, we will not only see the angel enter the cell, but we will discover the most shocking and perhaps the most encouraging thing in this story: the reaction of the believers themselves when the answer to their prayer knocked on their door. It's a reaction that reveals a lot about our own faith. Brothers and sisters, today we are going into the prison with Peter and into the prayer room with the church. We will learn that when man reaches his limit, God is just beginning. Stay with me, because we are about to witness the power of a church that refuses to accept defeat. The ordinary world for the church in Jerusalem had become a nightmare. Persecution was no longer a distant threat. It was a bloody reality. The Apostle James, one of the 3 closest to Jesus, was dead. Herod's sword had tasted the blood of the saints. Fear was palpable in the streets. Meetings were secret. To be a follower of Christ was to be a target. Their world was defined by the oppression of a political and religious system that wanted to erase them from history. And now, their main leader, Peter, was on death row, awaiting his end. The Israelites in slavery in Egypt. Their ordinary world was forced labor, the sound of the whip, and the cry of babies sentenced to death. It was a hopeless existence under the crushing power of Pharaoh. What is the Herod that rules with fear over your situation? A mindset? A person? A system? Recognize the oppression you are facing, for it is against it that prayer will rise. The call to adventure is the crisis that forces the church to act. Herod arrested Peter also, and when he had seized him, he put him in prison. This is the declaration of war. The enemy made his boldest move. It was not an attack on just any member, but on the heart of the leadership. The adventure for the church would not be to rescue Peter with swords, but to enter a battle of a different order, a battle fought on their knees. The call for them was, are you going to give in to fear and accept defeat? Or are you going to fight with the only weapon you have left? Example of Esther. Her call was Haman's decree to annihilate her people. The crisis forced her out of her comfort zone in the palace and to risk her life. Crisis is often God's call to a new level of prayer and dependence. If you accept the challenge, comment, "Lord, teach me to pray." The refusal is not recorded as a decision, but as an overwhelming temptation. Think about the logic of the situation. 16 soldiers, chains, multiple gates, a ruthless king. James was already dead. The overwhelming evidence screamed, it's useless. God didn't intervene for James. Why would he intervene for Peter? The refusal is the voice of despair, the temptation to surrender to the visible reality. The unbelief we see later, when Peter knocks on the door, proves that this struggle against despair was real. They prayed, but a part of them, the logical and wounded part, was probably already grieving. Martha at Lazarus' tomb. "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Her faith was in the past. She refused to believe in a resurrection in the present, even with the giver of life right in front of her. "I prayed for my father's healing, but every medical report was worse. It reached a point where my prayers became an empty ritual. My heart had already accepted defeat. I was fighting against despair." The master, the strategy, the source of power for the church is revealed in a simple, powerful sentence. But earnest prayer was made to God for him by the church. Acts 12:5. The Greek word for earnest is ektenos, which means stretched out, fervent, intense. These were not casual prayers. It was a prayer vigil, a war of intercession. The master guiding them was the Holy Spirit himself, who enabled them to persevere, to stretch their faith to the limit. They had no plan B. They had no political connections. They had a direct channel to the throne of the universe, and they used it without ceasing. The persistence of the importunate widow. Jesus told the parable to teach that we ought always to pray and not lose heart. Continuous and fervent prayer is the strategy that moves the hand of God. Fervent prayer is the most powerful force in the universe. If you commit to being an intercessor, follow this channel and comment, "I am at war on my knees." While the church was warring in prayer, Peter was crossing his own threshold. The text says that on the very night before his execution, Peter was sleeping between two soldiers, bound with two chains. He was sleeping. He wasn't anxiously pacing the cell. He wasn't in a cold sweat. He was at peace. This is the peace that surpasses all understanding. He had surrendered so completely to God's care that he could rest on death row. He crossed the threshold of fear and entered the rest of faith. The external battle belonged to the church. Peter's internal battle had already been won. Jesus sleeping in the boat during the storm. His peace was not the absence of problems, but the presence of the Father, even in the midst of nature's fury. The peace of God is available even in the worst of storms. Like this video now if you wish to receive this peace that makes you rest in the midst of the fight. The test begins. The heavenly ally arrives. And behold, an angel of the Lord stood next to him, and a light shone in the cell. The enemy, the darkness, the chains, the guards is confronted by the power of heaven. The angel has to wake Peter up, striking him on the side and saying, "Get up quickly." And the first test of divine authority is overcome. And the chains fell off his hands. What was made of iron and human strength dissolves like dust before the touch of heaven. The heavenly ally is more powerful than the entire enemy system. The angel who shut the lions' mouths for Daniel. Divine intervention supernaturally neutralizes the enemy's threat. The chains fell off. A miracle. But he was still inside a fortress, surrounded by guards. The hardest part of the escape was just beginning. How would they get past the sentries without being seen? Do you believe that God still sends angels to help us in response to prayers? The Bible is full of examples. Does your faith reach that reality? They approach the darkness, the heart of the enemy fortress. The angel orders him, "Dress yourself and put on your sandals. Wrap your cloak around you and follow me." And Peter obeys, still in a daze, thinking it was a vision. And then they begin to walk. And he went out and followed him. When they had passed the first and the second guard, they walked past the sleeping or supernaturally blinded soldiers. Each step is a miracle of invisibility. The darkness of the prison becomes the cover for his deliverance. The exodus of Israel from Egypt. They passed through an enemy nation, protected by the pillar of fire and the cloud, made untouchable by the power of God. Prayer can get you through places where logic says you would be destroyed. If you trust in this divine protection, like this video. The ultimate ordeal. the final obstacle, the most formidable. They came to the iron gate leading into the city. It opened for them of its own accord. This was not a wooden gate that could be broken down. It was iron, the ultimate symbol of Rome's power and impregnability. No human force could open it. And the text says it opened of its own accord. The prayer of the church miles away moved the hinges of impossibility. This is the climax of the deliverance, where the weakness of man meets the automatic power of God. The parting of the Red Sea. It was not the wind that parted the sea. It was the command of God. His power rewrites the laws of physics to fulfill his purpose and protect his people. They didn't need to hide or fight the guards. The same power that made the chains fall closed the eyes of the sentries. Prayer does not fight against the soldiers. It commands the general of the heavenly army who neutralizes the soldiers. Declare with faith, God opens iron gates for me. The reward is freedom. And when they had gone out and passed through one street, the angel departed from him. The angel's mission was accomplished. And only then does reality hit Peter. When Peter came to himself, he said, "Now, I am sure that the Lord has sent his angel and rescued me from the hand of Herod and from all that the Jewish people were expecting." The reward was not just physical freedom, but the confirmed revelation, the absolute certainty of God's rescuing power. The deliverance of Lot from Sodom. The angels took him by the hand. His reward was being saved from judgment. Peter's reward was being saved from injustice. God not only sets us free, he gives us the testimony of deliverance. If you have a testimony of God's deliverance, comment, "He delivered me." The road back is Peter's journey through the dark streets of Jerusalem. Now he needs to reconnect with the church. Where would they be? When he realized this, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, whose other name was Mark, where many were gathered together and were praying. The delivered one seeks the deliverers. The answer to the prayer walks toward those who prayed. This is the road back to fellowship, to the place where the power was generated. The return of the prodigal son. His journey back was toward his father's house. The road back from our deliverance is always toward fellowship. The resurrection happens unexpectedly and even comically. Peter knocks at the door. A servant girl named Rhoda comes to answer. She recognizes Peter's voice, and instead of opening the door, in her joy, she ran in and announced that Peter was standing at the gate. And what is the reaction of the church that was praying fervently for his deliverance? They said to her, "You are out of your mind." They didn't believe it. But she kept insisting that it was so, and they kept saying, "It is his angel." They who moved heaven with prayer could not believe the answer when it knocked at their door. Peter's resurrection. From prison forced the resurrection of their faith, from theory to practice. The unbelief of Thomas. He needed to touch Jesus' wounds to believe. The church needed to see Peter with their own eyes to believe. This doesn't condemn them. It just shows how much greater God's grace is than our wavering faith. The key, the power that this story delivers to us, is the unshakable truth about intercessory prayer. When the church finally opens the door and sees Peter, they are amazed, and he tells them in detail how the Lord had brought him out of the prison. He returns not just with his life, but with irrefutable proof that united, fervent, and continuous prayer works. The power he brings back is the testimony. It is strengthened faith. It is the certainty that what they were doing in that secret room had the power to shake the most secure prisons in the world. The Great Commission. The disciples received the command to be witnesses. The power we take to the world is not our own, but the testimony of what God has done for us and can do for others. Maybe you feel like Peter, trapped in an impossible situation, with 16 guards and an iron gate. Or maybe you feel like the church, praying for a miracle that seems too big, your faith wavering. The lesson tonight is for both. For the one in prison, rest, for there is a church praying for you. Your peace is a weapon. For the one in the prayer room, don't stop. Your continuous prayer is the key that is turning in heaven's lock. You are dispatching angels. God is not limited by the strength of your enemy. He is limited by the extent of your prayer. The church in Acts 12 did not have a lamentation meeting. It had a prayer meeting. It's time for us to stop describing the size of our iron gates to God and start praying to the God who opens them of their own accord. The same faith from the same God is available to us today. Do not underestimate the power that is released when the church unites and prays without ceasing. Chains still fall, angels still minister, and iron gates still open. If you believe in the power of prayer and want to join a community of faith that moves the heavens, subscribe to this channel now and turn on the bell. Let's pray for one another. Who do you know that is in need of a miracle of deliverance? Be the person who reminds them that there is a church praying. Share this video with them and declare your participation in the army of intercessors by commenting #continualprayer. But earnest prayer was made to God for him by the church. Acts 12:5.